Well, good day and welcome to you. It is April the 20th. I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you happen to be. My name is Gary Willing, and as always, I want to welcome you to Search for Signs and just point out if you're new to this information and you want to know more, I suggest investigating this information for yourself to see if there's any truth to it. So you can do it however you want to do it. I do think the quickest, easiest, fastest, most efficient way is to check out some of the websites that I put links to in the description of these videos. So hopefully you'll look at it and take advantage of it some kind of way. But anyway, if not, no big deal. Now I do have something that came my way I want to address, and it's coming from Bongo. And like so many people, it's a comment, but it's more of a question. Other times people will put a question mark at the end of a comment, and it's more of a comment than a question, right? So I also want to say this too, because I noticed this recently, but the one thing that I've really started to think about more and more, not to get sentimental, is when I started this channel 3 years ago, I had no idea what to expect. I just wanted to talk about this information. But what's happened is, of course, I've had a lot of people comment, a lot of people ask questions, and in so doing, it's gotten me to think more about what I had to say and more about this information, me to learn more about this information. Hopefully it's done the same for others and so forth. But I also feel like I've gotten to know a lot of you. And each and every person who's commented, asked questions, I feel like I've met somebody that I would not have met had it not been for this information. And it doesn't matter whether you agree with what I have to say or not. You know, I do think about you guys a lot. Throughout the course of my day, I'll think about you. Hopefully everybody's doing well. I never think about the fact that I hope that you eventually see the light and agree with what I have to say or whatever. But I do think about what you're doing. Hopefully you're staying safe. Hopefully you have joy in your life, and hopefully you're helping to save the planet maybe. But, you know, you guys enriched me more than I could have ever imagined. And I do thank all those who have taken the time to comment and ask questions over the years. Like I said, I feel like I've gained some friends that I would have never met from all over the world because of this information. And then also, I have a guilty pleasure I want to confess to, is I enjoy reading everybody's YouTube names. So anyway, some of them are quite creative and funny, like Bongo, this one I'm reading. And Bongo, if that's your real name and your parents put it on your birth certificate when you were born, hopefully I didn't offend you by saying that, but I thought that was quite a creative name that you came up with for your YouTube channel, like the Flying Car Show, all the latest. So far better than Search for Signs. But anyway, what did Bongo have to say? Hi, new subscriber here, smiley face. I have heard the name Maitreya for many years. However, the way I first heard the name was through my introduction into Buddhism about 20 years ago or so. However, as far as the master in this universal form, maybe for about 10. Coming from an ultra-religious background full of dogmatic propaganda, I used to think on the same line of defense the critics here have tried to use. However, over the last several years or so, a lot of my new perceptions and beliefs have fallen in line with a lot of the viewpoints you have presented in this video. I would like to learn more about the master. If you have any information or sources you can share, I would be absolutely grateful. Of course I do, Bongo. They're in the description portion of these videos. I would recommend checking out the Share International site first. If you went there, you would get really all the information I think you need about these masters, about Maitreya's priorities. You can see images of miracles and how they relate to this story. You can watch videos and listen to audio recordings of Benjamin Creme, the spearhead of this information, and learn about this information that way. I do think and I do recommend the best way to know about these masters is to read articles coming from one of these masters. Benjamin Creme's master wrote articles that were published in Share International every month that Benjamin Creme was alive. And you can read them by going online and going to the Share International site. There's a tab to the left. It's entitled Articles by the Master. That, I think, is probably the best way to understand one of these masters, understand how they'll teach us even, because it is a master teaching humanity, teaching us, so you can get a better understanding of how they'll teach us and so forth. But his articles are so wise and yet so simple. Every once in a while there's a word or two that I don't know the meaning of it, or I don't know how to pronounce it. I got to go look it up. But for the most part, you don't have to come up for air every single time you read a sentence. It's really simple and easy to read, but yet you can read about a lot of different topics, because he talked about a lot of different things. But you can really get a sense of these masters the best way that way, I think. And even some of the articles that he talked about, perhaps a crisis or a conflict that was going on 40 years ago in the Middle East, for instance, you can apply to what's going on today, really, and the solution thereof of that and that kind of thing. And the way he teaches is, I think, and it expresses through his writings, is the way that these masters will teach us, the way that Maitreya will teach us. Very detached. Look for it yourself and see if there's any truth to it for yourself. They don't demand allegiance. They don't demand that you believe this information to be true, like so many people do with the Bible. It's the truth in the matter. If it's true, it's true. If it isn't, it isn't. And it might not be true for you, right? Once you look at this, which happens a lot with these people who are critical of what we talk about here. It doesn't really matter, but but if they just applied what Jesus said and what was written down in Luke, a tree is known by its fruit. You don't have to go very far to see if there's any truth to this information, really. And then you don't reject it outright, but you also don't accept it just on the basis of accepting it either, which is just as bad. That's why Maitreya is not claiming to be Maitreya on TV or the Christ come back. He's just presenting himself as an ordinary person so people can see the truth to what he's saying for themselves in an honest and very simple way. Now, to apply it to what we talk about here, right, the principle of sharing, central and core to Maitreya's priorities is the principle of sharing, because it's the only thing he says that will bring about peace. Now, I offer this up as historical evidence with the Marshall Plan. This is a good example of a tree is known by its fruit. If you look what happened and ended 70 years ago with the Marshall Plan, where the United States gave excesses of their resources to Western Europe to help rebuild Western Europe. And then they paid it back through giving back of resources back to the United States. That's how the principle of sharing will look, kind of. But it will be ongoingly, forever, and with every nation, and not just a few nations. But the nations that are listed, and if you go to Wikipedia, you can see all the nations that are listed that participated in the Marshall Plan. Every single one of them has not attacked one another since the Marshall Plan ended. Started and ended. And prior to that, some of them were very much at war with one another. Now, had the Marshall Plan taken place and ended 70 years ago, and every one of those relationships got worse, then you could say that there's no truth to what he's saying, right? But why people reject it outright and think that it's evil based on the fact that they're misunderstanding their own scriptures about who and what the Antichrist is. But you don't have to go very far to look at it. Just take what Jesus says and apply it. If the teachings of the church, not of Jesus, were true to what Jesus said, then we would be living in a far different world than we're living in today. But over the centuries, the churches and the teachings, and now it's moving into the political arena and so forth of the United States and around the world and so forth, with Christian fascism and the way that it is that bringing about love and tolerance and understanding and compassion just as Jesus taught? Or is it bringing out something entirely different? You don't have to look very far to see that if there's truth to this or not. See what I'm saying? So I always present this, with the Marshall Plan, but also in terms of the way that countries like the United States especially have over the years put out as a propaganda that what they do will bring about peace and security. Eventually, one day it's going to eventually bring about peace and security. Dropping bombs on this country, invading this country, shocking on this country. That's going to bring about the end of terrorism and security and peace that we all long for. And the question is very simple. Has it ever created peace? I already know the answer to that, right? I'm sure you do too, and everybody else, right? So you can apply, like I said, you can apply that to anything. Looking at capitalism and commercialization, one of the tenets of capitalism that's put out there is that capitalism and commercialization brings about innovation. But has it really brought about innovation? To some degree, yes, maybe. But it's also brought about things like planned obsolescence. Our refrigerator, our stove, our TV, our toaster even. It's got a life cycle to it that they planned it in there so that it will eventually die on you after a certain number of years, so you have to go out and buy another one. So that's how they make more money. If a refrigerator lasted 50 years, they wouldn't make any money, but yet it would be much better on the environment if we had a refrigerator or a stove or something that didn't need to be reproduced every so often, right? Same thing with cars, right? They already have technology that a car can travel all the way across the country on a single tank of gas or a little bit of water even. But yet the oil companies don't want it because they would lose all their profits if they did that. Same thing with the pharmaceutical companies. It's better to treat than cure, right? And there's more money in treatment than there is in cures, but they probably have cures for a lot of really serious illnesses that could enrich the lives of so many people, but yet they won't do it because they're all about profit, right? So that's where I think if you look at what's going on in the world, you could see very clearly what is good and what is evil, or what is good and what is bad for us even, if you wanted to put it like that, right? And so I think when you read Benjamin Creme's Master's articles and start to apply some of the things that he says even to your own life, same thing with Maitreya's teachings, and apply it to your life, it can change your life for the better. And then you can see if there's truth to it for yourself or not, versus just rejecting it outright or even believing it outright and not doing anything with it, because that's just as bad, really. So, that's, I think, is probably the best way to look at it. Like I said, but I think Benjamin Creme's Master's articles are the best way to understand these masters based off of what Jesus said, a tree is known by its fruit. And then if you look at the Alice Bailey link, and then maybe even buy an Alice Bailey book or two. I mean, it reads like a college textbook, but you can understand the masters that way too. I do think the writings of Benjamin Creme are easier to read. He compiles the Alice Bailey books along with some other writings of, let's say, Helena Blavatsky or Helena Roerich or something like that, and compiles it in a way that's very easy and simple to read, and you can breeze right through it. Even though you might not understand everything right away, you can read it really quickly. Where the Alice Bailey books read like a college textbook. They're much harder to read, but you can get a better sense of the masters through reading Alice Bailey too, if you take the time to read it. And then lastly, if you look at the video link that I have in the description portion of these videos that take you to the YouTube channel for Krishnamurti. Now, if you don't know who Krishnamurti was, he died some years ago, but he was being trained by Maitreya to be the world teacher for this age of Aquarius. Just as he trained and worked through Jesus 2,000 years ago, and some of the other teachers like Rama, Mithra, Zoroaster, the Prince Gautama and Hercules were all world teachers for the times that they lived. But and the masters of those time that worked through them in that way to teach humanity, at that time and so forth. But they were all world teachers. So Krishnamurti was being trained for that role. Now, if you listen to those videos, he never once mentions that truth, that he was being trained to be a world teacher. He doesn't even mention it. But the teachings that he says are central and core to the teachings of Maitreya. In fact, Maitreya said one time that he is a perfect example of the teachings of Maitreya. But if you look at, let's say, one of the teachings of Maitreya, which is central to and core to all his teachings, which is honesty of mind, sincerity of spirit, and detachment, the art of self-realization, really. Those are the three things that we need to do moment to moment to bring about a realization of who we truly are as the self. If you listen to Krishnamurti's videos, whether he's giving a talk, answering a question from somebody in the audience, or even if it's a one-on-one interview like that, you can really get a sense of truly what honesty of mind, sincerity of spirit, and detachment. When he talks, he doesn't speak with any prejudice, any kind of hypocrisy, or any kind of agenda. It's very simple, detached, heart to heart, just as Maitreya will be teaching in that way. But when you listen to any one of these masters, when we see these masters out and about in the world, they know nothing but honesty of mind, sincerity of spirit, and detachment. They do that moment to moment, right? But then to circle back around to the teachings of these masters, of Benjamin Creme, of Maitreya, the need to serve. They keep talking about the need to serve. We need to start losing focus on the individual self and focus on others, or focus on the outer, you know what I mean, and help the world and that kind of thing. So that will bring about the joy and the peace that we all really secretly want within our hearts, is because when you serve, you lose all sense of our individual problems and needs and petty little wants and so forth, and you're just kind of there helping somebody else. And, you know, it's funny because this guy came into where I worked one night, just a little side note. I don't know who this person was, but, you know, it was quite an extraordinary experience for myself personally. But he asked me one night, he goes, "Why are you so happy on this job that's kind of meaningless?" Really, it's not a dead end job, but it might seem like that to the outside world, that what I do is just kind of, but I told him, I said, on my job, I train people coming in that have just been hired how to do this job. So when I go to work, I forget about my own problems, I forget about my dramas in my life, and I can kind of focus on them. And then when I go back to my problems after I'm at work, they don't seem quite as real or as heavy, you know. So it makes me happier, and I feel more joyful in that regard. And I said, it's not much different than when I paint. I forget all about the problems that I got going on. I can just kind of focus in on the painting and be creative. And he goes, that is it, exactly, and walked out, right? So these masters, Benjamin Creme's master, Maitreya, and, you know, even Jesus talked about the need to serve others. If you apply that, you'll see that it will change your life by doing that. And these masters served moment to moment. But they had to start somewhere. So they started out as a selfish person too, and then they've, through the course of many lifetimes, learned to serve, learned to, you know, forget about their own little problems and so forth, and focus on others and so forth, to the point where now they're purely divine, moment to moment, without ever thinking about themselves and their own little petty littleness. They have no pettiness. They have no little will. It's all about what's going on in the outside, really. And that's what every time we see these masters, when we see them and know them, especially Maitreya, they'll be known for their joy because they don't experience the pain and the suffering that we do, because they don't think about themselves as a little self. They only think about themselves in terms of helping other people. But that's why they're teaching us this. But it has to start somewhere. But that tree is always known by its fruit, Bongo and everybody else, you know. And you can take anything and measure it and judge it and see if it's true for you just based off of that. So if the Christian teachings that you grew up with brought you joy, happiness, peace, made you more tolerant toward other people, then keep doing it, because you're doing something right with it. If you're not a tolerant person, or known for being a peaceful, loving person or a joyful person, then you're probably doing something incorrect with that information, which is the ideological dogma that we've all come to know and love about the churches, you know, over the years. So that, I think, would be the difference. You know, it doesn't take much to see it, you know, and then when you read Benjamin Creme's Master's articles, you'll see what I'm talking about. But anyway, thank you very much for your comment, and it got me thinking too, and everybody else who commented, I really appreciate everything too. So you guys take care and enjoy the day. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.